We've all heard that we learn from our mistakes. And that's very true. We fall down, we get up, we brush ourselves off and we keep going. But in our brain, something is imprinted in there. Learning from the mistake can be more powerful than simply getting it right the first time. But in the area of teaching, I think we let down our students a bit. We mark them in red pen, we use crosses, we use the horrible word fail. And that instills a sense of guilt, shame, and disappointment, which quite frankly is not conducive to long-term learning. So in vocational education, we're a little bit lucky. We're training people to do work, to get a job and go and apply the skills and knowledge they've learned in our training to successfully produce an outcome. So our learning environments are perfect for making mistakes. In fact, we want them to, because if they can make the mistakes in a learning environment and excite those neurons that tell them this is a learning experience and I can get this right next time, then we're doing them a favor and we're actually improving the quality of their learning outcome. So in this video, we're going to cover 3 things we can do to not only improve the culture around making mistakes, but also modeling how those mistakes can lead to better learning outcomes. I think this is a super important thing that we as teachers can learn to accept. Our own vulnerabilities come through by sharing with others the mistakes we've made, maybe learning the same concepts, and that if they make mistakes similar to this or different from this, it's okay. These are going to lead to better outcomes. And we're going to also teach them why, so that this is something you can ingrain in your normal lesson structure to help your learners actually look forward in a way to making mistakes because they know that they're going to learn better as a result. So let's get into the PEN principle to start with, and then we'll ask these 3 questions and we'll endeavor to answer them in the rest of the video. Let's have a look. PEN Principle 8 states that we should embrace error to improve learning. Only by effortfully practicing tasks that one finds difficult rather than easy can one gain a meta-awareness of personal skill sets and advanced performance beyond novice and progress to expert. Educationally speaking, we call it productive failure. The more a student struggles and even fails when learning new information, the more likely they'll be to recall, transfer, and apply that into future learning. Neurologically speaking, during learning, low performers often demonstrate enhanced activity in reward networks following positive feedback, and high performers show enhanced activity in attention and memory networks following the errors. So let's ask ourselves, how can we create a culture in which errors are embraced? And what can we do to educate learners about the efficacy of errors? And finally, how do we model behaviours that lead to embracing error? A culture is defined as the ideas, customs, and social behaviour of a particular group of people. Idea: that mistakes and errors are not a bad thing. Customs: if a mistake happens, how do we customarily address it? And social behaviour: how do members of the class and the teacher behave around instances of error? To move a culture from one set of ideas, customs, and behaviour to another can be challenging. But if we simply think about it as a change of everyday habits, then we can start to break it down into manageable chunks. Firstly, we can start with the idea that mistakes are not a bad thing. If the current culture views mistakes as a reason to criticise the culprit, then it needs reframing. Reframing is the act of seeing something from a different perspective, and it can start with words and actions. If a student makes a mistake, offer words of encouragement like, "You're on your way to getting it right," or "Great, you've identified there's another way to go from here." And actions that confirm this new frame or view, like smiling and nodding and running through the problem with them to see where the error occurred and see what they can do from there. As a first step, this is a good start. By evenly applying this new idea and set of actions for every student, the custom of dealing with mistakes begins to change. As the change starts to take hold, monitor how other students react and correct behaviours like ridicule or frustration gently. Again, applying the same reframing, you might say things like, "Do mistakes happen in real workplaces? How could this error happen in a real work environment, and what would you do to avoid it or correct it?" So that your habit begins to stick, it'll be valuable to take a moment to explain how errors lead to better outcomes. You can use examples from your own work experiences, as well as some facts behind improved learning, such as when you make a mistake, you'll be way more inclined to recall the correct way to do it in the future. The research behind this encourages time to reflect and compare the correct actions with the student's mistake, all the while normalising mistakes as a way of learning. Just as an aside, the word normalise means to accept a behaviour as being within the normal scope of possibilities, and therefore it's reassuring to students that their mistake isn't a catastrophic failure on their part. If you've ever made a mistake in a classroom full of other students, and let's face it, who hasn't, then you can also recall the feelings associated with it. These feelings are a direct result of your learned environment. And as we're trying to reframe this environment, remember that students will still have these feelings up until the culture has sufficiently changed to accept mistakes as a necessary step in the learning process. The habits are already starting to change, so your continued words and actions as the teacher can either hinder or help the process. To help the cultural change, consider things like setting difficult problems with the aim of generating mistakes that can be discussed openly. Letting the students know that making a mistake will be likely and that we're going to focus on why this occurs so that we can improve over time. While some teachers want to appear impervious to error, others are happy to discuss how they made mistakes in the past. And of these two personalities, the latter will be the more engaging, interesting, and genuine. Students want to have their feelings and actions validated. Being a perfectionist will alienate some students and even be the cause of anxiety and stress. If they see a mistake as something that shouldn't be allowed on their journey to competency, then each mistake becomes a source of distress and shame. Thanks for watching, and please consider subscribing and ringing that little bell so you get notified when the new videos are made available to you. Consider commenting as well. We'd love to start the discussion in the comments. See you soon.